I think that's enough waffle. Cheers, Ben, or Santé. Sorry, I think you're still on mute, Ben, but I'll get you unmuted to have a cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. It's an absolute pleasure to have you back. I'm sure members agree. Your cheese knowledge is exceptional. And Ben is going to talk us through all 4 of the cheeses that he has selected for tonight. And I'm going to talk through the wines. The way we're going to do it tonight is I'm going to start with the wines first so that you can get drinking quicker. We had a bit of feedback that the other way around meant nobody knew what to drink when. So let's make it nice and easy. There is nowhere else we could possibly start. Let's start, if you have it, with a champagne, or in particular with the champagne I have, which is Louis Brochet, the Heritage or Heritage cuvée, and it's the non-vintage. So Louis Brochet, well, I'll tell you a little bit quickly about champagne. I'll talk a bit about the producer, and then we're going to crack on with the pairing. But the Champagne region is quite vast. It's a really, really large area in northern France. I'm sure most of you know where Champagne is, but if you don't, it's almost in the center, slightly to the east, but it is, yes, very northerly, meaning it's lovely and cool. So the grapes grown here are very high in acidity, and I'll talk about why that's important in a minute. But they don't get jammy, they don't get hot, they remain fresh and vibrant. It's a large growing region as well, so the actual production area under vine is enormous. So it's 34,000 hectares make up Champagne. This particular champagne, Louis Brochet, was founded in 1881. The family founded it. It's called a grower champagne. This is where it's based. You can see the big map of the Champagne region and then that little red circle. So it's actually based in Écueil, which is classified as part of the Montagne de Reims. So the Montagne de Reims is that blue section you can see at the top. And on the next slide, you can kind of see where the vines, it's not a mountain, let's be honest, but you can see the forestry at the bottom of this map. That's the start of the mountain. Reims is up at the top right of your screen, which is the town, and then the mountain, i.e. large forested hill, just to the south of it. And the winery, again, just in red there to show you, you can see that whole section is beautiful, beautiful crisscross plots. I always think it looks like patchwork of vineyards. It's classified, pardon me, Premier Cru. So all of their plots, all 30 of them, have the highest possible level of classification. So this is technically a Premier Cru Champagne, which is unbelievable value, shall we say, this wine is, because all of those plots are deemed absolute top sites. Really quickly about the winemaking, because it is important, but it's the predominant grape is 80% Pinot Noir. So they really love to focus on Pinot at Louis Brochet. In particular, they have a clone, and it's called Pinot d'Écueil. So it's the Pinot Noir from exactly the Écueil region that they are within. So it's 80% Pinot Noir, 15% Chardonnay, and 5% Pinot Meunier. So that the reason I chose this particular wine to go with the cheese is that Pinot Noir adds a real richness. It adds a lot of depth. It adds some kind of more honeyed notes, in my opinion, more appley, pear, a little bit less of the Chardonnay lemon, and a bit more of those orchard fruits, those white fruits. So it was fermented in stainless steel. It has then been aged on its lees for between 24 and 36 months. And yes, it's essentially a very, very concentrated champagne. It's got masses of flavor. We did an Other Sparkling Wines of France event on Friday of last week. And I have to say, having done sort of a series of Cremants and not having had any sparkling wine since, this really packed a punch when I opened it earlier, and I thought, oh my, yep, that's a Premier Cru champagne. That's serious business. So why did I pair this particular wine with the cheese? I tried initially, Ben and I tried to match region and region, but quite frankly, the cheese of Champagne is not fantastic, or it's far better if you go a little bit further south to Burgundy. So this is, Ben will tell you, a cheese from there, but the main reason that it goes well with Burgundian wines and with champagne, in my opinion, is because those styles of wine had masses of acidity. And this is, I've got my little cheese plate here. It's not as attractive as it normally is because I was actually snacking on it earlier. But the cheese that you can see that Ben's going to show you is very rich, and he'll talk about why. But the acidity in the wine for me is what makes this pairing absolutely brilliant. It's a rich cheese and a rich wine. And for me, that's an amazing combination. So I think without further ado, I'm ready to drink some wine, eat some cheese, and hear about the cheese. So Ben.
Thanks, Anna. Yeah, so as Anna was saying, the cheese does match perfectly with the champagne, and that's because of the basically the fat content within the Chaource. So Chaource is a raw cow's milk cheese, and it's lactic set. And around the edge of the cheese, we have this white rind, which is a Penicillium candidum rind. In the centre, we can see quite an orange hue, which means it's cow's milk. We have a breakdown from the outside in, and then we have this nice lactic cheese in the middle. So Penicillium, so the white rind gives it a really lovely coat. It gives it a slight bitterness, but that goes really well with the richness of the cheese. So we're looking for the complexity, the lots of different flavors and textures within cheese, and Candidum gives a great bitterness to everything else that's going on within the cheese. Chaource is, it varies between 2 weeks and 2 months old. I'd say the one that we sent you was, I think it's probably 3 to 4 weeks old. So we get that little bit of breakdown, which get deeper and richer flavors. And then in the middle, we have those higher acidity lactic flavors. This cheese dates back quite a long time. So it was developed by the monks in the Middle Ages. And basically, being a lactic set cheese means that they were able to milk their cows and then leave this cheese in their vats and then go off and do whatever they did during the day and come back, and it formed a cheese. So lactic set means that it uses its own acidification. So as you can see on the left, there are some vats there that they use, and they would leave that for at least 22 to 26 hours. So it would use the acidification within the milk to produce curds and whey, and then you take the curds from that, and you produce this cheese. On the right, you can see a very happy gentleman with his cows. So yeah, so it's full cream. It's you know, it's fatty. It's got some nice lactic acidity within the center. It's got quite a big fatty mouthfeel, I would say, which, you know, pairs perfectly with champagne, which cuts straight through it. What do you think, Anna? Do you think it?
Yeah, I love it. I love Chaource. I was introduced to it when I used to do wine tastings at West London Wine School, actually, not in France at all. And somebody there said that it was their favorite cheese was champagne, and I've sort of lived by that ever since, because for me, I love when you've had it out. One person I think's mentioned give it a few days and it starts to get liquidy. I couldn't agree more. You don't even need a few days. I mean, in this sort of temperature, mine started to go runny, and I just love the licking it off your fingers. It then coats your mouth with this beautiful goo, and then the champagne. I think one of the reasons it goes so well for me is not only does champagne have a high acidity, but what sets it apart from, say, a high acidity Chardonnay and Burgundy is that those bubbles cleanse the mouth so beautifully. So they sort of act as a bit of a washing machine effect. And so instead of the cloying richness of the cheese, your mouth gets all washed out and delicious, which, yeah, I think is brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm also pleased that there are cheeses that work with champagne. It gets so overlooked.
But all of those, you know, those double cream, triple cream, full fat cheeses go so well with champagne for exactly the same reason you just said.
Yeah, and I think for me, if you're thinking about, I mean, an ideal dream evening for me would be a cheese and champagne night. Ben, let's make it happen. But the older the champagne gets as well, you can start to go for things like Comte and Parmesan, because champagne when it ages can go a little bit nutty. So actually the diversity of things that go with champagne is fantastic. But for this, a relatively young but rich non-vintage champagne, it was the perfect match for me. For the members who weren't sure of the name or who've just joined us, it was Louis Brochet, and it's a grower's champagne, and it's a it's a personal favorite of ours at the Wine Society. Very, very small family run operation. We did do an event with them last year. Now, Ben, you mentioned that the rind was quite bitter. William Peveler has asked to rind or not to rind.
Always rind. So I would always rind unless you can't. So if you look at Gouda, so a Gouda would have a plasticate rind, so you don't want to eat plastic. And apart from that, tonight I look at Comte, and the rind is it's a wash rind, but then it's been brushed and polished many times with salt. I'd try it, but I wouldn't necessarily enjoy it. So I would always try to eat the rind. And you want to eat, if I cut this, I cut it so I go from the top to the bottom. So I get the breakdown, I get a bit of the rind, and then I get a bit of the paste as well.
Nice.
I want to taste the whole cheese.
Yes, and we covered that a little bit last time, making sure that you're not just taking part, you want to get the full experience and the different ages and the different processes.
Yeah.
So Chaource can be, would you say, a little bit like cutting a cake?
I would say you cut it like a cake, exactly. So a quarter here. And
nice.
then I would cut down here.
There we go, a cheesecake, lovely.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, members, if you want to, do feel free to try the champagne with, I wouldn't try it with the, personally, I wouldn't try it with the goats that we're about to go on to. But before we go on to the goat and the white wine from the Loire, do consider trying it with the Comte, because you might find that actually it's quite pleasant for you. So give it a go. One last question before we go on, Ben. John and V. Williams have asked, how is the rind formed?
So Penicillium candidum is put in at start culture phase. So you have your milk and it goes into the vat, and the first thing you add is starter culture. And your starter cultures are flavorings, or they aid fermentation and the coagulation. And candidum is basically put in there at that phase, and then we go through all the other phases, which I can briefly explain. Have I got time to briefly explain?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So we have milk, and then we have starter cultures, then we have rennet in some cheeses, but I've just explained with this, it's lactic set, so it uses own acidity, so we don't add rennet. And then we're salting and we're milling, and we're cutting the cheese into different sizes. The curds are into different sizes depending on the moisture you like in your cheese. And then we're molding and we're salting, and then we're maturing. And so we'll go right to the end of that and go to maturing, because we've got Penicillium candidum in the Chaource. And after it's been made, it goes into a room called a hastening room. And a hastening room is really high humidity, so about 95% humidity, and around 16, 17 degrees. And basically, it just brings out all of those cultures that you've put in. You put salt on the outside to draw the moisture out, and drawing the moisture out means that you're drawing the cultures out as well. And so you're leaving it in this tasting room for about 7 to 10 days. You're forming this rind as quickly as possible, because you want to control the cheese within basically the rind. And then you're putting it into another maturing room, which is a lower temperature and a lower humidity, to just ease it out. and you want to keep it at that constant temperature and humidity just to keep it going.
Amazing. It really is incredible. Interestingly, and I don't know whether you can taste the salt, but it does feel like there is a sort of that rind almost still contains some of that salt. Would that be true to say?
Yeah, I'd say so. On a soft cheese, you salt the outside. You don't salt the inside, because when you salt cheese or salt anything, you draw out moisture. Within soft cheese, you don't want it to. You want to draw moisture out from the middle, but you don't want the middle of the cheese to be dry. In a hard cheese, you salt the interior and you salt all of the curds to draw out more moisture. Okay. So exactly, yeah. Fascinating,
thank you. We've had Jeremy said he likes the Comte and the champagne, so that's good. As does TJ. So yes, that was a bit of a double whammy, the cheeky champagne, but sadly they're not quite as close together as the regional pairings that we've done. But I knew it could be a sneaky one that we could get in there as an extra pairing as well. So I think without further ado, Ben, and members, do keep sending in your questions. What we'll do is when the questions are relevant to that particular cheese, we'll just go with the flow and I'll ask along. But if we should have some time for questions at the end. I think we allowed 1 hour and 15 for this. So, we'll have a bit of time for Ben and I to hopefully, fingers crossed, ask some more generic questions as well. So do feel free to send them in. But we are going to go on to our second wine. And our second wine is from the Loire Valley. So not hugely further south than Champagne, but we are zooming across to the west coast of France. So if anybody is less familiar with perhaps the towns of Nantes or Anjou, you might be more familiar with Ile-de-Ré or La Rochelle, and it's just north of those towns. The wine that we have is a 2019 vintage of Château de Tracy. Arguably one of the most famous, it's the most famous on the Tracy Hill, of course, its namesake hill in the Loire, but within Pouilly-Fumé, which is the actual particular appellation within the Loire that this wine comes from, it is deemed one of the best. They are the masters of the grape variety Sauvignon Blanc. And it should come as no surprise for anyone who's a Sauvignon Blanc fan that we have paired this with a goat's cheese. Because but we'll go on to that in just a moment. But yes, so Pouilly-Fumé, this particular appellation within the Loire Valley, is about 200 kilometers south of Paris. It's not huge, so it's only 1,200 hectares. So the Loire Valley itself is enormous, and you get all sorts of styles of wine. But the areas that are better at Sauvignon Blanc are generally the more inland areas. And the appellation is circled, so Pouilly-Fumé is circled on here, but you can see its more famous next door neighbour. Just across the river there is Sancerre, and arguably Sancerre is probably the home or the cultural heritage, whatever you want to call it, but it's the heartland of Sauvignon Blanc. A lot of people compare what's the difference between Pouilly-Fumé and Sancerre, sorry. The soils are slightly different, and I'll show you a photo of those in a moment, and particularly Pouilly-Fumé champions its soils. But in reality, even some of the best tasters in the world and MWs, etc., say that the two styles are converging, and it's actually quite hard to tell the difference. So here's the river bending round, as you can see. Sancerre on the left, and then you can see Tracy-sur-Loire on the right, and then the circle with our particular winery within Pouilly-Fumé here. Château de Tracy is it's been the same family since the 14th century. There are only 33 hectares, and they're on the slopes all around that circle that you can see there. In terms of soils, because they do say that they are particularly important, the soils are here we go, Kimmeridgian limestone and silex or silex, depending on your pronunciation. Now, these stones, we're not going to get into the mineral debate. Can you taste stones? No, nobody can taste a stone. The stone is not going into your glass. But, for example, when I said that smelt of apples earlier, an apple hasn't gone into my champagne. So I think it is fair if we say that these that these wines have a mineral quality to them. We can perceive a stony, flinty sort of aroma. So beautiful nose on this wine. It's everything you want a Sauvignon Blanc to be. It's lemony, it's gooseberry, it's got that tiny bit of chalky, flinty note. Really, really pure Sauvignon Blanc. It's also, and I think you can just about smell it, but I think you're going to get it in the mouthfeel when you taste it. It's had the lees, i.e. the dead yeast cells, stirred in a little bit after fermentation. And what that does is it's quite a French method. It gives a bit of body and a bit of texture to the wine. So it makes it quite a bit more, in my opinion, food friendly. So great for pairing with cheese. If you have got the original Château de Tracy, that is their flagship wine. And that particular wine is grown on old vines. And that's the Flint and the Kimmeridgian that you saw. And the tea, Mademoiselle tea, which is slightly cheaper. I think it's only £4 cheaper, but we're also selling on the website. I know a few members emailed and said they got that as a backup. That's on slightly younger vines, so it will be a little bit fresher and slightly less concentrated. But the soils are also 90% limestone. So again, it might have a little bit less of the flinty aroma that tends to come from the actual Flint soil and Kimmeridgian. But don't tell anyone I said it came from the soil, because technically it doesn't. But of course, if you can smell it, I'm not gonna argue with you. So in terms of why I think that this wine goes very well with goat's cheese, it's an age-old tradition. Goat's cheese, Sauvignon Blanc, match made in heaven. But why? Firstly, what grows together goes together. I've heard people claim that because the goats eat the grass of the region, then those grassy notes come out in the wine. I think that is a stretch too far. But what I would say is there's lovely freshness and vibrancy in this wine, and Ben will talk about what there is in the cheese. But the other thing is I find Sauvignon Blanc personally can have actually a slightly flinty, sometimes metallic taste to it. And I don't mean metallic in a negative way. I mean it in a really positive way. And I find often the rind with goat's cheese has that same metallic taste. And so for me, they really are a perfect partnership. So again, I'm excited to taste the cheese and the wine. So Ben, I'm going to hand over to you whilst I get greedy.
It's definitely acidic. I completely agree with you, especially on the rind as well. When you're tasting this, I'd advise tasting some with the rind, and then maybe take the rind off as well, because it is quite metallic and that metallic bitterness to it. But the next cheese is Sainte, and I have the worst French pronunciation, so please excuse me. But Sainte is made in Sainte de Tourraine. It's raw goat's milk, and I think, as we said previously about French cheese, a lot of French cheese is a cooperative, and it has been for hundreds of years, whereby many farms from around the region will bring their milk together to one dairy, and then they will make these these beautiful goat's cheeses or cow's milk cheeses or whatever. But this is from the Loire Valley. It's ash rinded. It's Penicillium candidum. So as we said on the Chaource, it has this white rind, and it does on the Sainte as well. But it also has this wrinkly rind, and this wrinkly rind is geotrichum, and geotrichum gives more complexity to the cheese. So it gives it a depth to the rind. Its candidum gives a slight bitterness, and so what they're trying to do is equal it out, basically. So they want enough geotrichum and they want enough candidum. Candidum is great for holding the rind together. Geotrichum on its own wouldn't be so great, but it gives a great complexity to the cheese. So this, again, it's fairly young. It's a lactic set, so 22 to 26 hours. We leave it in vats overnight, and then we hand ladle the curds out of the cheese into molds, And we get this from Jacquin, which is in the middle of Celsius, Valençay, and Sainte-Maure de Tourraine. So they're right in the middle, which means that they can make them all. As you can see on the left here, they're making Celsius. So they have these vats, and then they're hand ladling. And hand ladling is fab because you're not breaking up the proteins within the cheese. You're caring for the cheese, and you want to be, really soft with them. And then it brings out this really moussey texture. Within Sainte-Maure, which is the only one within Loire, they have a straw in the middle of it, which is basically inserted to hold the cheese together. But it's also there for ventilation within the cheese. And on each straw, I don't know if you can take it out, or if you have done already, but it does say that it's an AOP Sainte-Maure de Tourraine, and it has the batch number on there as well. So for each Sainte-Maure, you will have a different batch number and a different straw. So as I was saying earlier, it's on the rind, it's fairly metallic and it's fairly bitter. But if you taste the cheese itself, it's a bright acidity. It's citrusy. We're in the if you're 3 weeks old, early spring at the moment. It's going to be very bright. Later on in the winter months, autumn months, we're going to have really depth, like a real deep, earthy flavour. But I haven't tasted it with the wine yet. How is it with the wine, Anna?
Oh, it's good.
Yeah?
It's just lemon and a tiny bit of that chalkiness. Not overpowering, but yeah, for me, it's the zing. It's just two wines that are so bright and fresh, and I mean, I can't think of a better spring or summer pairing, actually.
Yeah.
Actually, the cheese has got a decent acidity because the cheese is making my mouth water as much as the wine is. The combination is very refreshing.
I love how it makes you salivate. I think it's really
great. We had a question from Anne, who asked, why is the goat's cheese often rolled in ash?
It just aids the mold growth, basically. I think there's a bit of a myth whereby it settles the pH of the cheese, but I think I hear that from a lot of people, but I don't believe it does. When they put it in the hasting room, so they do exactly the same to this as I was explaining about the Chaource, where they put in a really high humid and temperature room, and it just aids that mold growth. It means that it gets a rind in it a lot quicker, and then to like settle it down. So that's why they put ash on them. And also it preserves it. And I think it's these cheeses that we're talking about, these 4 cheeses, they're hundreds and hundreds of years old, and they would have put ash on them just to preserve them a little bit longer.
Yeah, members just mentioned that the ash can also be used, or was historically, it wouldn't be now, I'm sure, to stop flies settling on it. So again, sort of a historic preservative practice.
Exactly, yeah. Same as salt. Yeah.
Nick Law has asked if the Tourraine cheese is from the same Tourraine as Le Haut Louis Sauv Blanc, which is a wine society wine. Yes, it is. And actually, Sainte-Maure, where this particular cheese is from, is an appellation in the Loire. So they make wine as well under the same name. Not the best wine of the Loire, but as you can imagine, it sells exceptionally well around Christmas time or Valentine's Day because it's Saint Love. So you don't see a huge amount of Sainte-Maure wine on the shelves any other time than Valentine's Day. And then suddenly the world and his wife have put Sainte-Maure at the front of shelves. So yes, they are the same place. And that's what's quite nice about pairing cheese and wine, not only for the flavors, but actually the wine appellation system is based on the cheese. Cheese came first. Cheese started designating regions that could produce certain styles with regulations and typicity, and wine copied. So a famous baron in the 1930s said, yeah, we'll have some of that for the wine, please. So it's a lovely pairing, you know, to have those two stories. The Tracy Sauvignon is now out of stock online. Is there more coming in? I can't confirm that there is more coming in immediately. We're having a few problems getting with lockdown in France, or what has been the lockdown for the last 6 weeks. We've had major issues getting stock in. I will follow up in the email whether there is any more coming in. However, what I would say is that the Mademoiselle Tea, which is their second wine, is a fantastic alternative. I think £18 compared to the 22. And I've tried that wine many times and it's absolutely delicious. Alternatively, there's plenty of other great wines from Pouilly-Fumé that are wonderful alternatives. Domaine Savoie might be a good alternative. We'll pop both of those in the chat for you there. Right, okie dokes. I love that pairing. I could talk about it all day. I had for lunch today, I've mentioned this to Ben earlier, but I had not with this beautiful goat's cheese, with a sort of supermarket, not particularly inspiring goat's cheese, I have to be honest, but I made a asparagus and goat's cheese frittata, I guess you'd call it. And honestly, tasting it, other than the eggy flavour, but the asparagus and the sort of white peppery goat's cheese flavours, it basically was calling out for a glass of Sauvignon. I didn't want to open this and cheat, but I think I've got some left over. So a Friday lunch might call for some Château de Tracy and some more asparagus and goat's cheese frittata, I think. Okay, let's move on to the next wine because it is a little bit unusual. I'm hoping that members, at one point we didn't think we were going to be able to get this wine. So I did recommend an alternative being Syrah. Now, if you do have a light fruity, fresh Syrah, then hopefully it's still going to work. I asked Marcel, who buys this wine, what the alternative would be, and I'll explain why Syrah was his choice in a moment. But hopefully some of you will have got your hands on this wine, and I say hopefully twice as much because this wine has just been Tim Atkins' wine of the week, I think last week, and he gave it 91 points. So if you do like the sound of it once I've talked about it and you haven't yet tried it, then get your hands on some soon because we're selling it really, really quickly again. And this is our second batch because another journalist whose name escapes me said they loved it a few weeks ago, and that's why we had problems getting the stock in. Now, why is it so popular? Let's talk a little bit about it. First of all, I've cheated a little bit on this again. This is a wine from the Savoie region rather than Jura. Our product coding system is a bit odd at the Wine Society, and we group them together as Jura and Savoie. But I think it's important to say this is a Vin de Savoie, which is a particular appellation within the Savoie region. Savoie is quite strange. We have got a map that I'm going to show you in just a second. Very few wine regions look like the relief map of Savoie. There's lots of isolated small sub-regions. You've got Switzerland to the east, Jura to the north, and Bugey to the west over the river. It's still a really small region, so there's only 2,000 hectares in total in the whole region. So Savoie is the orange parts. You can see they're really dotted around. The wine that we're having here is, let me try and find it. So where Chambouret is, we're just next to that. So right down at the bottom of Savoie. We're actually the winery is actually based in Chigny. And apologies for my pronunciation, I can never get that one quite right, but Chignin. Now, of that sort of orangey bit, that is the same size as the Pouilly-Fumé section of the Loire region, and it only accounts for 0.5% of French wine. So it's really not a huge producer. This winery has 22 hectares. The majority of what they make, and generally what is made in the Savoie, is white. You can see here, I mean, they're really within the mountains. We are in the foothills here. The grapes are grown at really high elevations, between 800 and 1,800 feet. So it can get incredibly cool. Luckily, this particular producer, the commune Chigny that they are in, has a little microclimate, and it can get warm and a bit hotter. And that is fantastic, because this particular grape variety, Mondeuse, or Mondeuse rather, is the main problem with Mondeuse is it can't always ripen well. So good Mondeuse, which you do have in your glass, I promise you, because 2019 was a fantastic year, which is why the journalists are going crazy for this wine. Good Mondeuse has violets, dark berries, black pepper, spice. And if some of those descriptors are things that you say, hey, that sounds like Syrah, the pepper, the spice, the black fruit, that is because Syrah is related to Mondeuse, and it's either related as a half-brother or a grandfather. DNA profiling has worked out the family tree, and it's that level of related. So they're not exactly certain how, but certainly a very, very close relation and variant of the grape. The problem with Mondeuse is when it doesn't smell this delicious, it smells bad. So bad Mondeuse that hasn't been fully ripened can be quite vegetal, a bit cabbagey. It also has naturally very, very high acidity, which is great for pairing with cheese, but not so good when it's not ripened properly, because the fruit flavors aren't there, and you just have this searing, tart, bitter acidity, but with nothing to back it up. Whereas this particular version, the 2019, and this particular producer, if I'm quite honest, Jean-François Quénard, is the top of the top. And so really you're going to get quality, and you're going to get a wine that's beautifully in balance. So it's a relatively, in the grand scheme of things, young winery, founded in the 1930s. And yes, it's a beautiful, very, very regional wine. I had to throw in a sort of local speciality in our regional French wine and cheese, because it felt like we were going for some big hitters with Champagne and Pouilly-Fumé and Monbazillac. And this punches above its weight for price. But I also think it's really fun to try new things and try interesting and unusual varieties. It has been aged slightly 10 months, but really this wine's not about long aging. You can keep it in the bottle, that's fine. It will keep to drink, but this isn't a wine it's got this beautiful freshness. You don't need to lay it down. You can drink it just like this. I love it. And to be quite honest with you, Comte, which we are going to talk about now, and Ben's going to share with us, more traditionally you would probably pair that with a white wine, and particularly a white wine from the Jura. But I love this combination, mainly because it's different. And I think it's really nice to explore and try some new things. I think it's light enough for the freshness of the cheese. It's not too heavy a red wine. And to be honest, they are regional cheeses. They're both Alpine. It's a regional pair. It's an Alpine cheese and an Alpine wine. So I hope that you enjoy it. I'm going to sit back and listen to Ben talk a bit about the cheese. Please, please, please let me know what you think of the wine if you've got it. If you like it, if you don't like it, please let me know.
I completely agree with you. It's so light and refreshing, but then it bursts in your mouth. I think it's beautiful. I really love it. And you wouldn't naturally pair red wine with cheese. You would naturally pair white wine with cheese, and this is, I really like it. But within cheese, we have Comte next, and I think a lot of people, or most people, know Comte from the Jura region. So it's raw cow's milk, and it can only be made by two breeds of cow, which is Montbéliard and French Simmental. That's within the PDO, and it's been made since the 11th century. So it's pretty old cheese. You can generally buy it from about 4 to 36 months, and I would say that the one that you're eating tonight is probably about 14 months. The rind it's actually a wash rind cheese. So if you think about a wash rind cheese, if it's soft, something like Stinking Bishop or Roll Right, or what else have we had? Sincera, what's it really? Apoisse. They're all wash rind cheeses, but this is a hard wash rind cheese. And once it's been wash rind, it's then airbrushed. So basically the Affonier will brush and polish the coat of the cheese for 12 months, 2 years, up to 3 years, with salt, and they'll polish the edges. So Comte is a really funny one because, again, it's a cooperative, but it's made by about 2,500 farms within the Jura, but then they're sold to about 150 Affonier. And then from there, 2,500 farms are producing milk for Comte, and then it goes to about 150 Affonier, and then from there, we have about 13 people within France that take it and develop it further, and so you have such a vast I guess variables within Comte, because you have all of these different farms that have the same milk that go to the same fruitier, that then they're developed within a few months, but then taken to Affonier, and then they're developed even further. So that would mean that there are so many variables to how this how Comte would end up. So we get ours from Marcel Petit, and Marcel Petit is supposedly the best Affonier when it comes to Comte. And here he is, very young Marcel Petit. So he's ironing his cheese there. So they taste their cheese. I would say every day, taste about cheese every single day. And what they're looking for in their batches is, within a young Comte such as this, at 12, 13, maybe 14 months old, you want sweetness. Within a summer Comte, you want a nuttiness, but it's not cooked, and it's not roasted. It's that fresh nuttiness that you're looking for, which very much varies within a summer and winter milk Comte, because it's very, very bright and vibrant, and the color of it at the moment, it's really obvious that that it's very bright, and that it's I would say around 12, 13 months old. But you look at October, November cheeses that are Comte, and they're very dark. Obviously, we have these cows that make Comte during the summer, and they're really high up in the mountains, and they come down in the winter, and they're making Mondeuse. So that's why you get basically the same cows make Mondeuse during the winter months, and during the summer months, which are a lot longer than the winter months, they make Comte.
It's delicious. I mean, for me, Comte, I've a couple of members said Comte is hard to beat. I think we do have a bit of a love affair, don't we, in the UK with Comte? Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know the stats, but I'm sure it's up there probably with some of the best bought cheeses. It's certainly my fiance's favourite, and we love to go to French markets and see the kind of big slabs of it. There's a real romance to having an enormous piece of Comte cut in front of your eyes. So
they're 36 kilo cheeses, and they're made in big rounds, so they could take them down the mountains easily. Yeah, it's crazy.
Oh, fabulous. Now, I did have a member, I apologise. It was Alan Pierce. What Jura wines match the Jura cheeses? I would say if I were to have picked another wine, I would pick a Jura wine made from Ploussard, perhaps the grape variety. It tends to be quite nutty. But often it's the way the wines of the Jura can be made. What I mean by that is lees stirring, oxidation. So it could even be made with the Chardonnay grape variety. For example, we've got L'Étoile, a special cuvée of their Chardonnay, for example. But it's the way that they make the wines. They have this lovely nutty flavour. The same with the Savagnin that they make. It's very, very high in acid, but they oxidize it almost, they protect it from oxidation like a sherry. So you get these Fino-esque flavors. Very polarizing, I have to say. So if you've been a fan of this red wine, give it a go, but you might find that it's not quite for you. But those Fino flavors that come from a lot of those Jura wines that have been treated in that way go with the harder winter versions. So the ones Ben just mentioned, the really intense ones that you get that have been aged much longer towards October, November time. Those are the ones that I would really recommend with those punchy Jura white wines. This lovely light, fresh Comte, I think, is much better with something light and fresh and refreshing here. Okay. Yes, Vin Jaune would be great. Not to everyone's taste again, but I love a Vin Jaune with a very, very mature Comte. You can't really beat that. But it is very much punch and punch. You know, it's not for the faint-hearted when you start to pair those styles of wine. Okay, I didn't show you the bottle, so I will quickly, just of that particular wine. Here you go. Like I said, if you do like it, I would get in there as quickly as possible. When we picked it, we obviously didn't know that 2 major journalists would choose it as their wines of the week. So we have had to get a second batch in, but it's now here, but who knows how long it will last. And we did have a lovely picture. I don't know whether you could possibly go back, Catherine. But this is a real small family operation. In fact, all of these are small producers I've picked tonight for intentional reasons. But there is a lovely picture of them stood on the hill. Everything has to be picked by hand. You have to, it's really hard work. And you can see them here. It's a proper labor of love. They've got their backpacks on. They're putting the grapes in the back. It's hard work to pick wine here, and actually the fact that they can deliver a wine for such an exceptional price with such backbreaking work is amazing. So yes, so I think we're ready to go on to the final wine, which makes me sad but also excited, because I'm going to be honest, this is my it was very easy. Many members will know that we were waiting on another wine from the Southwest France, a red, because I thought, I know that members do like to have red wine and blue cheese. And last time we did a sort of port and blue cheese. And I thought, okay, if people would like a red, then we'll go for it. However, in my heart of hearts, I always wanted to do another sweet wine. And then when the red was unavailable, I thought, oh, what a terrible shame. I'm going to have to do my all-time favorite sweet wine. And I say all-time favorite, I really don't mean like it's the wine that's wowed me the most. It's the wine that's made the biggest impression on me. It is the sweet wine that I buy the most of, that I love every single glass of. I've never been let down by it. And the price is so, so good that I can drink this style of wine midweek. And unfortunately, you'll see that I have, because I've only got half a bottle with good reason. But yes, I've actually got the 2017, and I believe we're now on to selling the 2018. So you will have one or the other, but both great vintages, so it doesn't really matter. This is the label here for you. And yes, so it's the Château Pech La Calevie. It is made in Monbazillac, and it is a sweet wine. We've labeled it 8 out of 9 on the sweetness scale, very sweet. But what I would say, it's got loads and loads of acidity. And for me, it's not as sweet as a Sauterne. So if you are, I know there's a few members tasting Sauterne tonight. I'll explain in a moment how it's made and why it is very similar to Sauterne. But for me, this is just a little bit lighter and more refreshing. You don't have to think about enjoying this. It just happens. It's gorgeous. But yeah, so on the next slide, you'll see where it is. It is in the Southwest France, so it makes sense that we're going cheese for region. It is that lovely little yellow bit in the middle of our map. You can see Bergerac just above it. Many of you may have visited Bergerac. Really, really lovely part of the world. Less dominated, I would say, by grapes than perhaps when you start to go up the river towards Bordeaux. But you've got a lovely combination of agriculture and beautiful landscape. It is just over the river from Bergerac, and I think we have a map to go with that as well. Technically in the Dordogne region, yeah. So where this particular wine is made, to give you a point of reference, is the red circle. And you can see, you know, Bordeaux, that very, very famous river going out. Rivers don't come in, do they? The famous river going out to the sea. But if you follow the path of the river up, you will get to Bergerac, you will get to Monbazillac. Now, in that middle section, you've got the Entre des Mers of Bordeaux, where between those where the two rivers fork, and also you have in that section up there where some of the most famous sweet wines in the world are made, Sauterne and Barsac. Now, the reason that the most famous wines in the world are made there is because of a phenomenon where there is mist on the river, and the mist travels through the vineyard, it settles on the grapes. You effectively you don't encourage because it happens naturally, but you're happy to see a lovely rot called Botrytis cinerea. So you have this humidity that creates a rot around the skin of the grape. If you ever heard the expression, noble rot, that's what they're talking about. It's the good rot. There are other not good rots, grey rot, we don't like that, but noble rot goes around the grape, and what it does is it pierces the skin of the grape, it dehydrates it, shrivels it up, makes it look unbelievably unattractive, like no human should ever eat it. It goes into sort of a bluey raisin thing. And what's happened is the dehydration of the grape has got rid of water, but it's kept the acidity, it's kept the polyphenols, it's kept all the flavor. So, and most importantly for this wine, it's kept the sugar. So you effectively, it's a little bit like Ribena. How dilute do you want your Ribena? This is full concentrate. That's what you've got here in your glass. It's expensive to make because naturally when you press those grapes, not as much liquid comes out. But what is in it is nectar. So you arguably don't need as much of it. Another reason I particularly love this wine is a lot of sweet wines from the region, less from Monbazillac, but from Sauterne and from Barsac, come in half bottles. This comes in a full 75 cl bottle. So it's a proper good dinner party wine or Anna's midweek joy. But it's an amazing value wine considering that it's a full bottle. And one of the key differences with this compared to Sauterne is in Sauterne, they sometimes include some Sauvignon Blanc. So the grape varieties would be Semillon, Muscadel, not Muscadet, Muscadel, and sometimes Sauvignon Blanc. This doesn't have any of that. It's just Muscadel and Semillon. It's rich, it's unctuous, it's honeyed, it's lemony, it's so sweet, it's delicious. For me, it doesn't really get much better than this. Tiny producer, Château Pech La Calevie. They are family owned again, only 22 hectares. Again, mainly white wines made here, but they do make some red as well. Sorry, that's the other wine. But don't worry, on that screen, you can ignore that. The estate dates back to the 14th century, but actually this family had some financial troubles and they had to stop production, and after the world wars they had to farm cattle and cereal. So it's only recently they got back on track. Jancis put this into her top 20 sweet and strong for Christmas in 2019, this particular wine, and so obviously it grew in popularity, but it is really still quite a small operation. Why does it pair? Mold and mold, so it's a classic pairing. There's mold on the wine and then there's mold in the cheese, so it doesn't get much better than that. It's cheaper than Sauterne and Barsac, which is great. And then if you really want to know flavor wise why it works, it's for me that real exaggeration. You've got the super sweet and the super salty, so you're basically playing with your mind, but it's like salted popcorn. You get salted caramel popcorn and all those things now. The human brain loves that tension. It loves that complication of it should be sweet, but it also should be salty.
It's also spicy.
It's spicy, yes. Those lovely like vanilla-y sort of aromatic spices that are absolutely gorgeous. Ben, I'll let you talk about the wine now because I'm too excited about eating the cheese with the wine.
Well, you can carry on, Anna, if you like.
No. I want to taste.
So yeah, I mean the Roquefort is super spicy as well. You have that, really intense, Roquefort, and we talk about all these blue cheeses and we go through them, and they're all from Penicillium roqueforti, and where does roqueforti come from? Is Roquefort. It's raw sheep's milk cheese. It's stunning. It's a minimum. It has to be a minimum of 90 days old, and it's made from a really rare breed of sheep called again, really bad pronunciation, but Lacaune, which is Lacaune. There's only one producer in England that do that, and that's St James Cheese up in Cumbria. But it's absolutely, it's beautiful cheese. It's the beginning of blue cheese as it is now. We think about Roquefort time. We think about the caves within Roquefort, and you can't make Roquefort without basically the molds that go on in those caves, and they get those they make their own rye loaves, and they put them in the caves, and then they take them out, and they have these molds and bacteria that grow. They send them off, they bring them back, and they put them within their cheese. And it's so rare that you have a cheese that is made in that way, and that's because they're trying to keep within this tradition of making Roquefort, which was around 1,000 years ago, when a shepherd went into a cave, and he left his cheese sandwich in there, and then he saw the love of his life, and he followed the love of his life, and they got married and whatever, but he came back a couple of weeks later and found this cheese sandwich that had loads of blue mold over it in these limestone caves in Roquefort, and that's basically the myth comes from
I love the myth of Roquefort.
Which is so ridiculous. And this is Roquefort Carl, and Carl is 4th generation of Roquefort. And they have their own little myth, which is this Red Riding Hood myth. And a lot of the time when we sell Roquefort, we sell it in the normal size, we keep the foil on because it's one of the most expensive cheeses that you can buy. And we keep it on because it is Carl, and it says Carl on it. And they have this Red Riding Hood, I guess, kind of story for them. So they're 4th generation, and Delphine now runs Roquefort Carl, and she has this Red Riding Hood theme, whereby her granddad asked her to go to the forest and get the best thing that she could possibly get, and she came back with a piece of Roquefort. And so now their brand is Red Riding Hood, because that's the best thing that
I love it.
Piece of Roquefort.
Well, we've had members say that it's one of the best Roqueforts they've ever tasted. This Roquefort is stunning. Contrast between this Roquefort and a sloppy supermarket Roquefort is amazing. I completely agree.
It's hugely different. It's crazy. They take, their lives are devoted around Roquefort. They've been doing it for 4 generations, I think it's about 110 years they've been doing this. And they make Roquefort as a soft cheese. So the make process isn't a hard cheese or a crumbly cheese. They make it a soft cheese, and they just concentrate on it. They look at how it's developing, and yeah, it's herbaceous, it's high moisture, it's fruity, but it's peppery. But you have that real subtleness of sheep's milk, and it just goes on and on and on. It's so beautiful.
It does have that amazing length, it really lingers.
It's almost powerful without being too in your face. It's got lots of subtlety. It's really lovely.
Yeah.
We had a member ask about what temperature you suggest to serve this cheese at, Kevin Blackman.
So it's always room temperature, but with a soft cheese, you don't want to leave it out for too long. So I would say with the blue cheese, leave it out for 30 minutes, 40 minutes maybe maximum. If it's a this is quite open textured, so you have big pockets of blue. If it's a close textured cheese, then it might take a little bit longer. Like a close textured cheese would be like a cheddar, but then you'd also have a close textured blue cheese like Bleu de Buffalo, or in England we have Burt's Blue, and so it needs longer. But with an open textured cheese, I would say 30 to 40 minutes in its wrap, which is wax paper. Don't keep it in cling film ever. And then maybe within 10 minutes of serving, take it out of its wax paper and serve it.
Perfect. Yes, I was always taught to get them out of the fridge early, but your tip about keeping them in the paper is fantastic, keeping their shape.
Yeah, exactly.
Barry's asked me what the best temperature for the Monbazillac would be. Really does depend on your preference, but really you should be drinking it straight out the fridge if you can. The reason I say that is the acidity needs to be in balance with the sugar. So your brain perceives acidity better when it's cold. So you believe things are more acidic the colder they are. And you want to have high acidity in order to balance the high sugar. So the colder the better for Monbazillac. Please don't destroy it and put it in the freezer. That's the absolute worst. But I just honestly have a little Monbazillac bottle many weeks in the it lasts a while as well, I should say, it lasts maybe 2 weeks open. But you just pop it, keep it in the fridge, pour a glass when you want it. This has been hard for me to know that it's been over an hour sat there. It's too warm. We have another Roquefort question as well from Robin, which is what makes the Roquefort so salty?
Because it's salted as a hard cheese. So the curds are salted, and then it's a young cheese, so you would get more of the salt within the young cheese than you would do in an aged cheese. And so Roquefort is 6 weeks old, and so you're always going to get more salt than you are from an aged cheese that is a year old. So I think that's what makes Roquefort so special. It's that in between cheese. It's made as soft cheese, but it's a hard cheese. Well, it's crumbly cheese or territorial cheese. And so there's all those fluctuations.
It's a cheese that is hard to eat with your fingers, I will say that. Yeah. It definitely needed a cracker. That was, yes, silly of me, I think, but it was absolutely delicious. I had another member ask whether there was another cheese suggestion for Monbazillac. The thing about Monbazillac is you're just going to want to pair it with something strong. Ben will probably be able to give me a name of a better example, but for me, something like a very old cheddar would be interesting, or a really old Gouda, something that's got that real intensity of flavor, because really the pairing principle is still the same. You want to have punch matching punch, sweet matching salty. So I don't know whether you've got another hard cheese that's not blue that you like with sort of sweet noble rot wines, Ben.
So with Gouda, you get very caramel notes and butterscotch. So really deep like flavors, I would say. I would say I think you're right with cheddar. I think we're going along the right lines with cheddar. Like maybe something like Montgomery's cheddar might go really well. It has that like a bit more earthy notes to it, which I think would be contrasted quite well with Monbazillac.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. You want to punch and punch. So if you're not a blue fan, just make sure that you have an experiment, but make sure that the cheese is strong, because the wine is stronger than you suspect. If you went back to your Château de Tracy now, its delicacy would be would be lost, I think.
Or wash rind. I'll go wash rind. Go like a semi-soft or soft wash rind with sweet wine, maybe.
Lovely. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, fantastic. I've got a couple of questions up my sleeve, but if members are heading off, I've noticed a couple of people saying goodbye. I do hope you've had fun. We've had one member say that they'd like me to pass on the thanks to you, Ben, because apparently their wines, the cheeses, sorry, tonight have all been exceptional, and I couldn't agree more. Really, really lovely, great choices. Did the French representation proud, I think. Some classics there, but also some producers that perhaps people haven't heard of. So there are a few more questions coming in. So if it's all right, Ben, we'll just spend the last 5 minutes answering those, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem.
Wonderful. So cheese suggestion for Sauvignon Blanc if you're not a fan of goat's cheese.
So
sorry, I think that means wine suggestion. Okay. I assume we had a great one on our last session, didn't we? Sorry, cheese suggestion with I've lost the plot. Yes, the cheese suggestion if you're not a fan of goat's cheese for a Loire Sauvignon Blanc.
So it'd be lactic set cow's milk. So we're looking at San Marcelin, San Felicien, if you want to go French. British, I think we have Lippiat, St. Jude. We've done St. Jude, haven't we?
We did do St. Jude, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a lovely cheese.
So yeah, you want something lactic set. You want something fresh and acidic and bright, in my opinion. What do you think, Anna?
Yeah, I agree. I think brightness, young cheeses, lactic set, from what I've learned from you, definitely seems the right angle. That's sort of creamy, but yeah, creamy so that the acidity in the wine can match the cream. Yeah, goat's cheese can be a bit polarizing, so I can understand that, but young, milky, for sure.
Yeah.
We did have another good question that I just spotted. Now I've lost it, so apologies. Bear with me just a moment. I have a question to you, Ben, whilst I'm just scrolling. I've found the question, but I want to ask you anyway. Do you have a favorite French cheese?
So I love blue. I mean, I love all cheese, but I love blue. And I could eat, if there was one cheese I could eat every day, it would be Fourme d'Ambert. And I
spell that, sorry, Ben.
So it's FOURME D'AMBERT. And it's just the most like easygoing, beautiful blue. It has big pockets of blue. It had the milk that they use in the Auvergne, so it's from the Auvergne, however you say it, Auvergne region. It's just I don't know, it's so rounded and it just goes so beautifully with the blue. I could just eat it every day. So I would say Fourme d'Ambert, Bleu d'Auvergne, you know, I would say when it's French, I would go for those two. But then
so you haven't got cheap taste then, Ben?
What?
Not a cheap date. The question that I had to pop up that I will answer now, if it's all right, is somebody asked about port and said, is there not a role for port and cheese now? There most certainly is. We did a great port with a Stichelton. So sorry, my pronunciation's gone there. On the last session, didn't we, Ben? And it was absolutely delicious, a tawny port.
Yeah.
And I think there is definitely still a role for port on the cheese board. I think Ben and I have talked about it before, but port is great with certain cheeses, but if we had to have a wine style that suited more cheeses, they tend to be white wines, and people avoid white wines because cheese is at the end of the meal and they've probably gone on to reds. And we're not just talking white sweet wines, stronger or powerful white wines that are dry are incredible with cheese. We could have easily paired all of the cheeses tonight with dry white wines. So I guess the problem with port that some people have is it goes well with what it goes well with, but it wouldn't have gone with the full range. So for me, if you're going to serve a port, I would actually keep your cheese board simple and go with a you know, a blue, perhaps a hard, mature cheddar, the one Ben mentioned earlier, and stick to a smaller range of cheeses, because if you are going with a port, it has got a limited options, I should say. It's also worth saying, not just port, but there are plenty of French port style wines. So there are some beautiful, okay, these aren't all exclusively port style, but Rancy or Maure, beautiful red sweet wines, Vendu Naturals, that are fantastic with, again, the likes of Roquefort. And we could have easily put a Maure in and it would have been sensational. So there are other options as well, French options that are great. Lovely. Well, I think that probably takes us perfectly to the end of the session, if that's all right, Ben. It's been such a pleasure. It's been a really, really enjoyable evening. We've had over 300 members join us tonight to talk all things French wine and cheese. I hope everyone is sufficiently full, fed and watered. I know that I certainly am.
We've got cheese in here.
But I hope you've had a lovely night. We will be doing more cheese and wine events. There's plenty left to come. Send us, oh, hello, Jeremy. You've got a lovely setup there. But please do let us know if you've got any ideas, if there's any regions, countries, styles you want to cover. We'd absolutely love to hear your thoughts. Ben and I can wax lyrical about cheese all night and all day. So the more the merrier. I will be sending a follow-up email tomorrow as well with all of the wines and all of the cheeses, so that if you do want to do a bit of extra research afterwards, then you can. But that's it from me. I'll get the champagne to do a final santé to Ben, my wonderful co-host. Thanks again for a really enjoyable evening and for absolutely brilliant cheeses, Ben. I've got cheese brain.
Cheers, Anna. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Thanks, members.
Thank you very much.